What is Iran's ultimate motive?
From the sea to the river. They want to control the whole Middle East.
So what do you think about our move to pull the troops in 2012? Good move or bad move?
Terrible move.
Tell me why.
You have to know, when Al-Qaeda member run away in Iraq, they end up going where? Some of them end up coming to this country.
If we make this decision, here's what could potentially happen.
That terrified them. And that's why they sent Soleimani.
In order for a revolution to happen, you know what's going to happen with students. It's going to cost a lot of lives.
If you think you're going to get it peacefully because they've been protesting peacefully, it's not going to happen. Nothing comes for free.
Where does the Ayatollahs go if they leave Iran?
He has nowhere to go. They are ready to kill every single citizen. They love their ideology more than they love their own people.
There has to be sanctions. There has to be pressure.
Yes, shooting people in the head.
Did they ever come after your family or no?
I never went home.
You're talking about a coup or a revolution or regime collapse. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Is that possible for that to happen?
We will have peace if the Ayatollah goes away.
30 seconds.
Did you ever think you would make it? I feel I'm so close I could taste sweet victory. I know this life meant for me. Yeah, why would you bet on Goliath when we got Bet David? Valuetainment, giving values contagious. This world of entrepreneurs, we get no value to haters. How they run, homie, look what I become. I'm the one.
So today I have a special guest with me. Since all the issues and controversies taking place between U.S. and Iran and the Middle East, I figured it made sense to get somebody that actually lived in Iraq and experienced this. So today's guest is Hamody Jasim, who wrote the book Terrorist Whisperer, which you'll find out here in a minute why this is. When Saddam's regime fell, Iraqi military restarted a new army, new military. He was the 19th soldier of that military, and he became the youngest sergeant major at 19 years old. And today, we're going to find out about the conditions of the Middle East from somebody who was in it. Hamody, thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you very much for having me.
So before we go into your story, I mean, a lot of the things you're seeing right now with the news, you're seeing Qasem Soleimani, you're seeing Iran, you're seeing World War III, you're seeing all this stuff. How are you processing all this information for somebody that's been there before?
It's kind of surprising, you know, especially the killing of Qasem Soleimani, you know, but I think many people don't realize that what Qasem Soleimani role is in that war in Iraq. I mean, my days goes back all the way back to 2006, 2005, when Soleimani was just establishing his little militias in Iraq and was going around Iraq communicating with Al-Qaeda and anybody that was fighting against the United States during that period. So it's kind of surprising, actually, to see finally that we put an end to Soleimani's efforts in the Middle East, because Soleimani wasn't just really any Iranian general. He was basically the smartest person in the Iranian regime. And Soleimani had figured out the keys to the Iraqi government, which is something that the American government did not know how to contain or control, because Soleimani have controlled the Iraqi government with a fist for the last 15 years, probably.
And have you ever had a chance to see him? Have you ever been around him?
I have witnessed the movement of Soleimani about 20 feet when I was working as an undercover intelligence asset for the U.S. intelligence. He started to move comfortably in Iraq as much as the U.S. troops started taking their hands away from Iraq. As you know, the Iraqi government was completely, majority of it was appointed by Iran. And the person that would choose these individuals or vet them or put them through the process to become in a certain position was Soleimani himself.
Majority of the people in Iraq that were put into power were chosen by those in Iran.
Absolutely. Soleimani would actually be the one to select them, and they would never get the position if Soleimani won't prove. So
the media is painting us to two different Soleimanis. I want to know from you, having been there yourself. Absolutely. One side is, you know, Iran loved him, 82% approval rating, all this stuff that you keep hearing about. You know, people mourned, thousands of people showed up to his funeral. That's one side, right? Yeah. The other side is a brilliant strategist, killing Iranians, killing Iraqis, killing U.S. soldiers, you know, vicious terrorists, Kurds, doesn't matter what it is. Anybody that's in his way, he's going through them. How do you view him yourself from experience?
I think he's been the perfect tool for the Ayatollah since the 80s in putting down protest and taking care of all the enemies of the Ayatollah or the enemies in Iraq or Syria or any other countries. You can never underestimate the intelligence of Soleimani. Soleimani has controlled Iraq. He called all the shots. And I think that Soleimani was a competitor for us as U.S. government, as U.S. military, U.S. intelligence. He was one of our main competitors until about 2012. When we pulled the troops, he became actually the main person to dominate Iraq.
So what do you think about our move to pull the troops in 2012? Good move or bad move?
Terrible move.
Tell me why.
Terrible move because once we pulled the troops out of Iraq, it gave Iran the full power to actually finally have their control of Iraq and the Iraqi government itself. You have an example, the person that died with Soleimani, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, was actually not allowed to be in the Iraqi government at all until about 2012 when we pulled the troops.
So if we wouldn't have, let's just say we don't. It's 2012, we don't pull the troops. We stay there. What changes? What would have been different today?
None of the key figures in the Iraqi government, none of the faces that went towards fame, we would have been as active as they were in the last few years. I think that pulling the troops, it gave them an opportunity to be part of the Iraqi government. Most of them were wanted by the U.S. government. Some of them were people that fought against the U.S. military, and they would not have found the chance to be in a position like that. They used to compete for that power. Once we pulled the troops, it became an open land for them, and they took control completely of the Iraqi government, perhaps because they're the only armed group within the Iraqi government. And they started controlling the Iraqi government one branch after the other, including the army itself.
Now, 2012 was Barack Obama as the U.S. president versus now we have Trump. You're in it. There's a big difference between me saying, here's what's going on in the streets of, Baltimore or Chicago or, Iran, Tehran, whatever it is, versus you're actually in there yourself seeing the decisions being made from the top of the president. What is the biggest difference between the way decisions were made with Barack Obama versus the way the decisions being made right now with Trump?
I think the media would portray them differently to the American people, but what I see differently is that President Obama made a huge mistake by pulling the troops the way they did. The troops should never have been pulled the way they were. If we planned a pullout for the troops, we should have planned it in stages, and we should have not left the Iraqis alone. It's almost like handing you a house without a roof. And that's what really happened in Iraq. We had so many projects, so many things that the U.S. military and the Iraqi military and the Iraqi government were working on together. And all of a sudden, we just disappeared and decided to leave. And people like Khalil Amiri, al-Muhandis had a great opportunity to come back.
But sometimes voters will get out there and they'll say, what a noble thing to do to pull troops out. We got to get out of there. Let them figure it out. Because there's two sides to it, right? One side is like, why are we getting involved with everybody's problems? Why should we get involved with everybody's problems? And then there's another side saying we got to get involved because there's business dealings, human rights, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts on both arguments being made?
I think Iraq fell a victim because of the competition here between Republican and Democrats. And I think none of them have really looked at the big picture to realize that pulling out the troops would have caused more damage. And you have an example of what happened in Iraq after the troops pulled out. ISIS had the biggest comeback. Perhaps most of the ISIS fighters that you faced in Iraq escaped out of prison after the troops pulled out of Iraq. 45 days exactly after the troops pulled out of Iraq, over 600 Al-Qaeda members escaped out of the Abu Ghraib prison. So this was a comeback for everybody, not just for al-Muhandis, al-Amiri, and Soleimani to have even stronger grip in Iraq. It was a comeback for ISIS and the extremists as well. So it left Iraq open, and Iraq became an easy place for anybody to do whatever they want.
Do you think Barack Obama and his administration, when they're making a decision like that, don't you like we would assume they have all the intel to know that if we make this decision, here's what could potentially happen? Do you think they know that and then they did it, or do you think they didn't know that and then they made the decision?
It all depends on the advisors that have. I'm expecting as a president of the United States, you should have advisors that evaluate the situation away from the political views. And that's the problem we've been having in America. We should not be evaluating things based on political views. And I think that they knew the consequences, but they were looking to convince the American people and have a win here in the U.S. by pulling the troops. But in Iraq, we didn't win. Many lives were taken. Many Yazidi children were taken as sex slaves. It caused a disaster. Mosul fell under the hands of of ISIS. And that's not only to blame it on the Obama administration, also to blame it on the key figures that took over after the pullout of the troops. I mean, al-Maliki, back then the prime minister of Iraq, he had a part to it. All the corruption that was happening was also part of what's happening. But I believe once the troops pulled out, corruption became at its full capacity in Iraq. It went to 100%.
Full capacity in
Yeah,
Iraq.
absolutely.
Worse than Saddam?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think
Elaborate,
about,
yeah.
I mean, if you think about Saddam, before Saddam was did any of Saddam minister would dare to steal something during Saddam? Nobody. But all of a sudden, you have a country with so many Saddams, and every single one of them is stealing the country in his own way. So the country just went to a chaos. Everybody was stealing. The army, the Ministry of Oil, everybody was stealing, whatever they are. And, you know, things were getting divided based on the religious background in the Iraqi government. It was not who is qualified in the Iraqi government. It was which political party, which Islamic group that you represent, so you take this ministry and you steal the hell out of it. That's how it was.
So things, are you saying things were smoother in Iraq when Saddam was in?
I wouldn't say like, you know, things were smoother. Saddam was the only bad guy. Look at it this way. And then all of a sudden you had all the bad guys that competed against Saddam to take power from Saddam. Because the people who actually came and took power of the Iraqi government of Saddam after Saddam had fell out, it was the people that didn't like Saddam, who were living in Iran under the protection of the Ayatollah, and mostly were members of the Battle Corps. And they're not any better. They're just as bad as Saddam Hussein.
How worse can things get right now, the way it's going?
I think the way it's been going, before the killing of Qasem Soleimani, we expected them to kill every single protester in Iraq, and they would not leave that place. And that's what I always said. They would kill every single Iraqi, and they're ready to do that before they leave power. Even though pre-Soleimani. But killing of the Qasem Soleimani has really left Iran in shock right now. The relationships that Soleimani held in Iraq, him and al-Muhandis, were basically the two key figures that held the whole entire Iraqi government. So now Iran has to come back and establish all these. So Iraq right now is under a golden opportunity to actually free itself from the Iranian influence.
You think they'll do it?
I mean, if you have millions of people protesting and they've been getting shot in the head, you know, hundreds of Iraqis, as you know, has been getting killed protesting peacefully for their country against the Ayatollah influence in Iraq, and they're still out there protesting as we speak. I think this is a generation that is very different. They did not live under the Saddam regime, is not afraid of anything. They are facing it the way they are. And I think that these are the future for us. But I don't think they will leave peacefully. I don't think they will.
You don't think they're going to leave peacefully?
No. I
Okay.
don't.
So how much of this, Hamody, is the relationship of Saudi Arabia trying to protect their interests with the oil, the second largest reserves in the world, and then they used Iraq as a wall, as a cushion between themselves and Iran, because Iran and Saudi have problems. They do a lot of proxy wars between the two of them. Yeah. How much of this has to do with oil? How much of it is religion? How much of it is nuclear? How much of it is power? And how much of it is politics?
I think, honestly, it has a lot of it to do with politics, had a lot of things to do with power, and also oil at the same time. Because you have to know that Iran has been under sanctions recently, but they've been doing a lot of their financing in Iraq behind the table. They've been liquidating a lot of their products. Iran basically uses Iraq as a backyard to take care of their finances.
Meaning what? Meaning what?
Controlling literally the whole entire Iraqi economy. It's under their control.
But is that enough for them to survive? So
not enough maybe, but they can use it to kind of lower the pressure of the sanctions on them.
Do you have intel? You're big on intel.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll talk about your story here.
Yeah.
But do you have intel to know what is Iran's ultimate motive? What is it? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to get through? What is their motivation of wanting to get closer to Saudi? Is there anything there? Who are they trying to retaliate to? What is their motive?
I think it's the ideology of the Ayatollah is to have the revolution of Iran from the from the sea to the river. They want to control the whole Middle East. And that's how it's been for us. Iranian influence has been going all over Iraq, it's been going to Syria, it's going to go into Yemen, and they want to have control. They want to have a representative in every country. In Lebanon, they're everywhere. And I think they want to have that grip of the whole entire Middle East. So I believe it is more over power than it is over everything else.
You think it's more power and control over anything else?
Absolutely.
So not religion, because a lot of times people think Sunnis and Shias don't get along. They actually have a lot of things in common. It's just a couple things that they differ. Abu Bakr and Ali, it's not a big difference between the two of them.
Exactly.
So oil, you're saying it is a little bit of oil, but it's not a lot of oil. Nuclear, Iran doesn't have any nuclear. They may do some stuff. I know you had some dealing yourself with uranium, that you had an issue going on with that. So power and control. Okay, so you get hired to be a consultant. You're in a room with 10 other folks who have intel, decision makers who know a lot about Middle East. Is there ever going to be a time where there will be peace in the Middle East? If yes, how? If no, why?
Yes, will be if we get rid of the Ayatollah and his government. Because as you see, the Iranian people, they've been protesting for years, trying to have a voice, but they're getting killed, just like how the Iraqis were getting shot in the head. I believe that everybody been minding their own business, like even the Saudis. Look, the Saudis had some influence in Iraq in their own way, but not to an extent to actually cause you harm, not to an extent to control you as a country under their wing. But Iran has been trying to control Iraq under their wing for since 2003, literally. So we will have peace if the Ayatollah goes away, because the Ayatollah's only goal is to control the Middle East with his fist.
Is that possible for that to happen? You're talking about a coup or revolution or regime collapse. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Is that possible for that to happen?
I think it's impossible for the Iranian people, because if they don't by themselves, because if they don't have the right backup, they can never do that. As you know, back in 2012, when the Iranians had a protest, and what happened to all the protesters that went out and protested against Ahmadinejad back then? They all got put in prison because they specialize in how to put a protest away, how to calm protest. And
how to put a protest away. The Ayatollah,
yeah. And you know, Soleimani was actually the perfect expert.
What is the formula?
I think the formula is to do certain things that would get your focus away from what you're trying to talk about or ask. And the reason why Soleimani came to Baghdad, because this was a major issue for the Ayatollah. I think that the Ayatollah does not care less if Sunni Iraqis goes out protest against him, but it terrifies the Ayatollah if Shia Iraqis goes out protesting against him.
Has that started yet or no?
Of course. The majority of the protesters that went out to protest were Shia.
Wow.
So that terrified them. And that's why they sent Soleimani. And Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes, Khalil al-Amiri were shooting people in the head with a sniper. They used all kind of things against protesters. And the protesters demanded they would not leave their position. So it went out of hand. And Soleimani has established a room in Baghdad into how they can distract the protesters. And the goal was to drag the Iraqi people and the protesters in a confrontations with the American people, or with the American government, or with the American military. But the protesters were smart enough, because the power of the internet, the power of social media, you have a generation that's completely educated, that is not blind, that don't watch just a couple channels like we used to do under Saddam and what Iran's.
That's right.
And they're very open-minded, and they understand politically every single move Soleimani was initiating in Iraq. Perhaps when they attacked the U.S. Embassy in Iraq, the protesters were only about 1.5 miles away, but not one protester entered the green zone towards the U.S. Embassy, because they knew that would be a trap. Because the goal was to make it look like the Iraqi people attacked the U.S. Embassy, but it wasn't the Iraqi people. These were the Iranian paid militias. So there are so many goals to drag Iraq in a confrontation with America, but people of Iraq, they're waking up. They don't want any trouble with America anymore. They just want the Iranian influence to go away.
And if that goes away, you think things will settle down in the Middle East?
Absolutely.
In a big way?
Absolutely.
So somebody's watching this and they are thinking about, okay, what would be the method to a coup? I mean, obviously, you know the Iranian Revolution, how it took place in 78, 79. Yeah. The approach they used, spreading tapes and giving tapes to each other, and recording Khomeini's tapes and listen to what he's saying, listen to what he's saying. The Shah's got all this money. What would be the approach today?
I think people have seen everything about the Ayatollah. The truth is already out there. The approach, I think, is to control Iran moves in the Middle East. If we go to negotiation with Iran, we need to make sure Iran does not put its hand in any other country. And if that happens, I think if they leave Iraq alone, Iraq will get up on its own, no problem. The only reason we couldn't get up on our own is because of the Ayatollah government.
So if they were to do it today, you know, I talk to a lot of family in the Middle East and what their fears are, parents especially. Parents don't mind with their lives. You know, they're sitting there saying, I'm 55 years old, whatever. But the kids, knowing in order for a revolution to happen, you know it's going to happen with students. It's going to happen with kids.
Younger generations.
Younger generation. It's always been the case. Green movement, it's always been the younger.
What we have in Iraq right now.
Exactly. It's always a younger movement, right? So, but for that to happen, it's going to cost a lot of lives. It's not going to be, they're not going to do it and it's going to be peaceful. It's not going to be 500 lives. It's not going to be 1,000 lives. You know that part. How do you describe that to somebody to say, if you want democracy, you got to go through it? Or is it part of the recipe where it's going to be painful for a period?
It's nothing comes for free. I've been telling my fellow Iraqis that if you think you're going to get it peacefully because they've been protesting peacefully, it's not going to happen. They're armed. They have weapons. They have organized militias, organized army. They control the leadership of the whole entire country of Iraq, like the leadership of the Iraqi military as well right now. It's not going to work unless blood is going to be shed, because they're not going to live. They're not going to leave peacefully, and they have tried. The Iranian influence in Iraq have tried all its cards. Right now, they have ran it through all of it. They call the protesters a Ba'athist, which is Saddam Hussein political party Ba'athist. But you can't call somebody who's a 20-year-old a Ba'athist who actually was born right after Saddam had gone away. They don't know what the Ba'ath Party is. So they've been accusing them with all kind of names, all kind of accusations, but they ran out of it. They have accused them of being agents of the United States. They have accused them of being spies.
Who believes it, though? Are the Iranian people believe in that?
I don't think the Iranian people believe in that. I think the Iranian people are pretty smart, and they know exactly what the Iraqi people want. Our problem as Iraqis is not with the Iranian people. Our problem is with the Iranian government. And that's the difference. Our problem with the ideology of the Ayatollah. I think Iran would be a beautiful country if the Ayatollah wasn't in it.
Let me ask you a question. What you see, 82% support that Qasem Soleimani had when he passed away, the Iranian, and then, you know, well, a lot of people are afraid of voting for the guy, similar to what Trump is, that a lot of Trump voters will never publicly say, I'm a Trump supporter, you know, and then they go vote and they don't talk about it because they're worried about politics within work. How much of Iranians, out of their 80-something million that they have, their country, how much of their population supports Ayatollah's philosophy, religion, approach of governing a nation?
I don't believe the majority of the Iranian people supports the Ayatollah.
What's majority, 60%?
I believe a lot less than that supports the Ayatollah. I'm a huge believer in that.
Less than 50% support him? Okay.
Absolutely.
30% supports him?
Have a revolution in Iran and you'll find out.
Only reason I'm asking this question is because there's a big difference between 50-50. Because 50, and America right now is what? Say 45-45. And 10 in the middle independent libertarians, which they'll go, you know, swing, they'll go this way or the other way, right? But you got 45-45, Republican, Democrats, right? Do you think it is a 50-50 split? Or do you think it's more 30% that support Ayatollah and 70% cannot wait for the regime to fall and collapse?
I think 70% cannot wait for the regime to, cannot wait for the regime. Because look, an example of Saddam Hussein. What did Saddam Hussein convince the people? That the majority of Iraqis wanted him in power. He expected to fight for 6 months defending Baghdad, and it took him how long for him to fall down? 3 weeks. Because if you tell the people and convince them that everybody support you, people can't express their opinions in Iran. You don't know how some of the Iranians feel. I reached to some of the Iranians inside of Tehran on social media, and I asked them, and secretly they would tell me what they feel. But I know when they go to their social media They're supporting Soleimani. They're supporting the Ayatollah of Iran because they're afraid to. And I understand that methodology because I lived under that kind of control. I lived under Saddam Hussein. And God, if you open your mouth during Saddam Hussein, you'll be gone. So I think that way deep inside of the Iranian people's heart is they don't want the Ayatollah. They want their country back.
Now, let me give you the other devil's advocate question for you as well. Just curious to know what you'll say about this. You just said, you know, mistake was made in 2012 when Barack Obama pulled the troops, and the next thing you know, it went from one Saddam Hussein to 100 Saddam Husseins being in Iraq, and it's in shambles, right? Okay, ISIS came back up, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, great. Now, somebody may say, okay, if there's a revolution in Iran, who is the voice? Who replaces it? Who becomes the new leader? At least at that time, there was a candidate, and it was Khomeini. Khomeini is going to come, and he was somebody people can rally behind for them. And against Mossadegh, with the help of CIA, it was the Shah, right? People rallied behind Shah is going to make Iran more westernized and give women more power, et cetera, et cetera. One, don't you need a personality like that for that to happen? Like you need somebody to rally behind. Yeah, who is that person today? I don't think Iran's got somebody like that today.
You know, Iran does not have, but I think that's what the Iranian people needs to figure out. Because if you look into the protest of their, if you look into the protest in Iraq, they figured this out. They were out protesting for about a month or so, and then they figured out we can't just keep asking for something that we don't know what we're asking for. We need to appoint a person that we think is the right leader for this country.
Who's we? We is who?
As Iraqis. So Iraqis actually have found an Iraqi politician that has not been under the Iranian influence. And this person—
Sunni or Shia?
He's actually a Shia, but he is not a religious guy.
Okay.
He is more of a kind of a, he's just like a liberal mentality.
Got it.
He's not under the Iranian influence. Perhaps he's been speaking against the Iranian influence. And he has a very long history of speaking against the religious figures. The problem with what ruining Iraq right now is the religious figures in politics. And I think that the Iranian people, they have a plenty of figures that are not religious, that wants to help Iran as a country. And I think that if the protesters in Iran figure this out, this could become a possibility. But I don't think the Ayatollah would leave peacefully. That will never happen, and we all know that.
Where would he go if he did leave? Like, let's just say, you know, the Shah leaves, Shah goes here, you know, he goes to all these different places where he's welcome. Where does the Ayatollahs go if they leave Iran?
He has nowhere to go.
That's the point.
So that's what I'm saying, is that Ayatollah will never leave peacefully. I think the Ayatollah will fight all the way to the end. And as I said, is they are ready to kill every single citizen of Iran or Iraq or anywhere else before they can leave. I don't think they care. I think they believe in the ideology of the revolution. They believe the ideology, the religious ideology, and I think they love their ideology more than they love their own people.
They love the ideology more than they love their own people.
Absolutely, indeed. I think that's what been.
It's a shame.
Yeah, that's what it been in Iraq.
It's a shame. So let me ask you. So now we talk about Barack Obama. Now let's talk about President Trump. And in the past, you've been critical of President Trump with him putting the what do you call it, the Muslim ban and what that was like. But what are your thoughts about what he's doing today with the sanctions he put and what he did in April of 2019 with the IRGC, because Soleimani was a part of it and he categorized him as a terrorist, et cetera. It's a terrorist organization. Yeah. What do you think about the approaches he and his administration have taken in the last 8.5 months?
I think before the election, I wasn't really sure of President Trump. After the election, he has proven to me that everything I wanted to see to happen, specifically in Iraq or the rest of the Middle East specifically is where I am looking at, is everything I wanted to do, he did it. And that's the power of asking the right people, talking to military advisors, understanding from people of experience. And I think that's why I gave President Trump a 5-star, because he has proven to me that everything he was doing is for a purpose. And I think that President Trump has been going on the right direction when it comes to the Middle East, and for that, I supported him on the travel ban because there was a reason why.
You supported him on the travel ban?
I endorsed President Trump officially on the travel ban, actually. Yeah.
And the reason for it?
Because we did have individuals that we battled in Iraq as a terrorist end up coming inside of the United States. Some of them went to court here and were arrested by the FBI. And there's a reason that we had to do that, because during Obama's time, we canceled some of the background checks they were supposed to do on some of these individuals. You have to know, when Al-Qaeda member run away in Iraq, when they're put an arrest against him and they end up running out of the country, they end up going where? They leave Iraq, goes to either Jordan. They used to go to Syria back in the day. And from there, we started taking refugees for the UN. And some of them end up coming to this country. That's kind of like that's very weak. You know, I think that we need to protect ourselves as a country here, and because our enemies wants to come here, they want to come inside of this country. And some of them that I have known and seen personally end up making it into the U.S. and I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe what I heard when I found out they were here. So I am not against refugees in a way, what I wanted to say, but I want to make sure we have a very strict process. We can bring fine, good people from the Middle East, just like myself. I'm an immigrant myself, like came to this country, started all over again, and we need to bring people who would be a great addition to this country. But I'm against people who would come to this country and want to harm it and will make life for people like myself extremely difficult.
So you support his decisions he made. You support the sanctions he put. He keeps increasing the sanctions on Iran. He's telling other UN nations, hey, tighten your own restrictions with Iran. Don't do business with them. These are all moves being made by somebody who would like to see an internal regime collapsing. This is just a formula. If you look at the formula on how to make a cheesecake, you put that together, boom, you have, this is the recipe on how to create a coup, you know, people against the regime, you know, a revolution. Is that kind of the direction you're seeing that going?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're seeing...
I think he put a zip tie on the Ayatollah's neck, and slowly he is closing that zip tie tighter and tighter and tighter. And as you can see what's been happening in Iran in the last 48 hours, that's an example to show you that this is the way to get the Iranian people to make a move towards the Ayatollah. You
know, Venezuela, I have a lot of people in our company that are from Venezuela, okay? And they came here, they love their country, just like Iranians love their country. I'm sure there's somewhere inside that you love Iraq and your family and your two uncles that were killed by Saddam's regime. I mean, listen, there's an emotional connection, affinity to the land that you have, right? But then you got to do what you got to do. You got to move on and go take yourself. You have kids, I have kids, you want to have them be in a safer place. Venezuela is got two regimes. You got Maduro and you got Guaido, right? So today, Guaido is a voice that people can get behind, and people can vote, and people can rally behind a figure. I don't know if an opportunity like this for Iran's going to come too often, like what they have right now. I mean, it's not like it comes once every 3 years. I don't think an opportunity like this, with the way the sanctions have been put, because in order for Iran to have the opportunity for a coup or revolution or regime collapse, there has to be sanctions, there has to be pressures, the government has to be tightened, there has to be a lot of fear from the top, and U.S. has to create the sanctions. So if another president gets elected and they remove the sanctions, Iran's going to start doing business again around the world with their oil. They're not going to be afraid. They're people right now. But my worries is Venezuela has a figurehead. Iran doesn't have a figurehead. And I would certainly hope, if they do want to see something happen, they have to be more urgent than they've ever been to rally behind a personality.
I think the Iranian people needs to be extremely careful on any steps they would take right now during their protest against Ayatollah. Because you need to go back in history and figure out when Mousavi and Ahmadinejad were competing against each other, what was the point of that election? What happened to all the Iranian activists that went on and spoke against Ayatollah? Where are they now? They're gone.
They're gone, yeah.
Because that was an opportunity to actually figure out who are the enemy of the Ayatollah. And I think they need to be careful, because this is what the Ayatollah did in Iraq. And as we speak, just in the last 24 hours, they have assassinated over 10 Iraqi reporters.
In the last 24 hours?
Just 24 hours. As we speak, they're assassinating people right now in Iraq, because their goal is to find out the activists, the most active voices in these protests, get rid of them, and once they're gone, these protests becomes just a loose cannon, and they go away. And that's been the style that the Ayatollah has been using. He did it in Iraq, and literally, I think the protesters in Iraq don't realize this by now, but most of their important figures who started this protest are gone. They've been buried. And the Iranian people need to be careful, and they need to be sure who would they appoint as a figure.
That's the part I agree with, because you can't get behind the wrong person. You got to figure out, and you cannot move. You got to be having meetings right now, figuring out who you're going to be doing. There's some people in the U.S. that would like to go out there and Shah Pahlavi's, Reza Shah Pahlavi's son. There's been conversations about him wanting to do it. I think it's going to take a lot of people coming together to decide who they want to do it with. Let me ask you, who is Iran scared the most of in the Middle East? Of course, U.S., they're not happy about the way Trump's making the decision, putting on the sanctions. But who's Iran afraid of in the Middle East?
I think there is not an individual that Iran is afraid of in the Middle East, but Iran, and the Ayatollah specifically, is afraid of his own Shiite in the Middle East to turn against him, because that's what happened in Iraq. And you have to know that Shiite Iraqis do not follow the Ayatollah. They follow al-Sistani in Iraq. They do not have the same belief as the Ayatollah. Perhaps the Ayatollah has appointed himself as the biggest religious figure for Muslims, but we do have a very small percentage in Iraq that are the followers of the Ayatollah, and they're the ones that control the Iraqi government, and they're the ones that he appoint to the rest of Iraq. So I think that Iran is afraid of its own believers to turn against them. And that's what I think terrifies the Ayatollah, to see Shiite protesting against the Iranian government.
I only ask because I wonder who the people protesting would need their support to help them that take place, right? Because not every country around the world would like to see Iran's empire fall. Not all of them. There's some that may not want to do because they'll have control over the oil. Some nations over there may help and support more, China, Russia. It depends, because it's yes and no, but it's not fully in. It'll be interesting to see who the people can go to have some backing that gives them courage to go up against Ayatollah's regime.
It has to be different than the Iraqi experiment. Like in Iraq, we do have this individual who's part of the Iraqi government. He's been living in England. He is educated. He's a fearless person. But for Iran, I do not believe it will be somebody from inside of Iran. It has to be an Iranian who is not inside of Iran. Because if he's inside in Iran, that person will be under.
So somebody from the outside has to go into Iran?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That would be the perfect way. So this person is not part of Talat. It's not part of the Iranian intelligence. It's not somebody that, they haven't played this game before. The Ayatollah has done this before. The Ayatollah right now, I think his next move is he will try to appoint somebody that secretly is under his control. And that's what I'm afraid for the Iranian people. Then you're not doing anything. You're not achieving anything at that point. So it would have to be somebody that the Ayatollah cannot psychologically control.
It's a very small window they got. I don't think it's a big window.
It's a touchdown.
I think it's a very small window they got here. You're so close, but
it's a very hard touchdown for the Iranian people.
I know.
But it's possible if they find the right personality and support that personality against Ayatollah. And I think that it's possible.
The shot clock is ticking, though.
Yeah.
The shot clock is ticking. That's the biggest thing.
And it's all about the leadership of the protesters. That's why.
It's all about the leadership of the protesters.
Yeah,
what do you mean by that?
It's like they have to have a leadership. They have to have a people that can actually decide what to do. Because if you keep protesting, you can just keep protesting.
You need
forever.
a rally cry. You need somebody at the top that's
you need smart people that know exactly where they can move. And that's how the Iraqi protesters actually been figuring out things over the last few days.
So let's go back to your story. So for you were born and raised in Iraq, right? And you are right now 34, which means you were born in what year? You were
1986.
1986. Yeah. So take me from the point of you're 12 years old and you get arrested. What happened there with your experience in Iraq?
When I was born in Iraq, I grew up in Iraq really not knowing what kind of world I was living in. But the older I was getting in Iraq, I was realizing that there wasn't really much freedom that I was living under, because you watch the elders being afraid of every single move they want to make.
This is during Saddam.
During Saddam. Yeah. It was a very well policed country. Put it this way, I mean, we have over like 35 different intelligence agencies under Saddam that police the whole country. So people were afraid to talk to their own wives about Saddam. People were afraid to talk to their own parents. People didn't have a trust on each other completely. And people were afraid. So when I opened my eyes in Iraq, I watched a family that's being afraid, couldn't trust me, couldn't trust each other.
Your own family?
Absolutely. Every single family in Iraq. Every single family in Iraq. We had brothers that put their brothers away, and they wrote a report to the Ba'ath Party. What they did is they...
What's the level of loyalty, though? Who are you loyal to?
It has to be only Saddam. Because Saddam had made the rules of that if you don't report anything that you heard, you're part of it, and you'll get executed just like the other person. So some people can get killed just for the fact they heard something negative against the regime.
How old were you the first time you saw that or witnessed it, an execution?
I mean, I was like around 11 years old, because Saddam actually used to take some of the people that used to get executed, they used to take kids out of school to witness it.
What's the outcome? What's the purpose of doing that?
Psychologically, to make you think before you do anything against the government.
Got it.
It's a psychological move. And it was to make you think. To
what
show you
what emotion was it producing in you as the 11-year-old kid? Were you...
I didn't want to watch death. I didn't want it. I want to watch it. But most of your teachers are Ba'ath Party members, and they tell you what to do. And if you don't, a whole report could be written against you. You know, it could end your life. It could end your family life. So you really didn't have much to say. You had no options other than following. Perhaps some of my teachers had a gun in their belt when they walked to class, because they were Ba'ath Party members. And what kind of argument would you have with that teacher? None. You just followed, and that's what it was, until I kind of got the real taste of it when I got arrested at age 12. When
you were 11, you saw that, you went home. Did you tell your mom, this is what I saw today, this is what I saw dad today, or no?
Nothing was getting discussed at home, because I know my parents would not answer me.
So what is your relationship with your mom and dad at the time? Like, how are you speaking to them? What are the conversations like?
Just the normal conversations.
I'm hungry.
We know not to talk about anything politics. We know not to talk anything
Zero.
about zero. They would not hear you. They will actually turn around and tell you something that you know it's fake. So there was no point to talk about it. You couldn't talk about Saddam anywhere. We had an example that says the walls have ears. Even the walls had worked for Saddam, and you can't talk to anything about it.
So they taught everybody essentially to be snitches, is what they did.
Exactly.
He wanted everybody to be a snitch.
Exactly, and reporting was massive during Saddam time. Like, people writing reports secretly to the Ba'ath Party member, and the Ba'ath Parties kind of put that up to whoever it is, and reports were being written at each other. We had family members that reported each other. So it was very well policed country, and he wanted it this way. This was his psychological formula.
Who is his example? Who did he learn from?
I would think, you know, there's a lot of controversies that, you know, Saddam was an agent of a foreign country. I think Saddam was not a stupid guy. He was smart. He was extremely smart. And intelligent-wise, the way he looked at people, he was meant, you have to know, Saddam worked as the head of the Iraqi intelligence before he became a deputy or a president in Iraq.
79.
During the 70s. He had a natural instincts, and he established all these formulas to actually, even his own family members, if they did something against him, he would know just by the way he looked at them. And that's the kind of guy Saddam Hussein was. Just by the way he looked at them.
Did anybody ever do an investigation on him to see what inspired him? What did he study? What books did he study? Who did he follow? Which style of leadership did he admire? Was there any kind of stories there that gives insight on him?
No, actually. He was, you know, when he was in prison, when he was out in Egypt, and he has read a lot of books. He's very well educated. Even though, like, he earned his military rank in a kind of fast way for being the president. But I think he was very well educated, very well balanced, and he is a very different, unique person psychologically. And I think that's how he controlled Iraq. That's how he controlled every single person that worked under him. Even his own family members were terrified of him, that they didn't know what his next move would be. So he policed this country in a very unique way, where he turned every single person into an informant.
So 12 years old, what happened to you when you got arrested?
I was walking out of school, and I came out of school, and it was a common thing down there. You know, if you are not an important figure of society, usually the people who are like in the Ba'ath Party or part of the Saddam's government, their kids would have like a military color Mercedes that will pick them up with 2 Republican guards. If you are not one of these people, you will be walking home. You'll be walking the 10 miles or whatever the miles that you have to walk to school. And it was a common thing for Ba'ath Party members to stop you and interrogate you in the street. This was a common thing. They can stop, they can talk to you, they can take whatever they have, what you have in your pocket, and you don't have much to say to do that. So it was a police officer. There was 3 police officers that actually approached me, and one of them looked different than the others. And that's the way to actually distinguish a Ba'ath Party member. Something about them always look different than average people. The way they dress, the way they have their badges on their chest, the way they would dress is a very different way. The way they would talk, you can feel it in the tone. This is someone of a power. And when he approached me, he asked me if I smoked, because it was a common thing, teenagers smoked in Iraq. And if I have any cigarettes. I didn't have anything. And I had money in my pocket. And he asked me, he's like, well, do you have any money? I can go get some cigarettes. And I said, no, I don't have anything. And I just kept walking. So he put his car in front of me, got out, and he came to me and he said, turn around, and started searching me. And he found money that I kept in my pocket. And it was about 250 dinars that I had in my wallet. I had other money that I would keep in my socks, knowing this would happen at any time. And I kind of felt at that point that for me, this meant the world. This was like money I put away over months to buy myself a shoe. You know, during the sanctions under Saddam, that things were very difficult. You know, I was walking with a messed up shoe, and that was open from the front. I couldn't even walk properly. And this was money from holidays and everything people would give you away, and just kind of put it together to eventually have the price that would match towards, towards a used shoe maybe. And when he took it away, I felt like I didn't want to keep my voice shut anymore. So I ended up trying to take my money back, and I cursed him. And when he hit me, this was a big thing in our culture. Once you curse him, I cursed him bad. And he grabbed me and threw me in the truck and drove me for about 45 minutes into the Iraqi Ministry of Interior inside of a prison.
And what was it like when you went in?
It was scary. I went to an area that I never
12
been.
years old.
I mean, they drove for about 45 minutes, and I still remember the conversations between the 2 guards that was sitting in the back and him, and they said, hey, he's just a kid. He's only 12. Why don't you just kick him in the head and let him go home? And he said, if you guys keep talking, I'll put you where I'm putting him tonight. And I realized at that point I wasn't going home that night. And it came to a checkpoint, which is a place actually I used to see going by, but you're not allowed to go inside of that place. And it was the Iraqi Ministry of Interior. And once I passed the checkpoint and I drove about like a mile and a half, this was all the intelligence headquarters, all the scary stuff that you heard about but you never seen. And I got pulled into a slide door that opened, and I went inside, and it was a prison, but I wouldn't say it looked like an American prison. It actually looked like a zoo. It's cages. And I saw cages. Like, it was just cages and fences, and there was concrete buildings behind the cages. And I sat there in a car. They took me out, and I went to a room, and they gave me a pen and a paper, and they said, sign. And I looked around all my angles of the room. There were people with bats, wearing uniform, wearing the exact same uniform as he is. Most of them carry the same last name that he had. They were actually from the same tribe. And when I took the pen, it was dark. I was terrified. I took the pen and I signed. Later on, I found out I signed on a paper stating that I was an anti-government that attacked a police officer and a Ba'ath Party member to kill him. So I was not being treated as a child. I got treated as an enemy of the state once I signed that paper. And I walked into prison.
So then what happened? How long were you in there?
I was there for about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks.
How'd you get out?
My family have found out, so I had actually about 250 dinar in my socks that I kept. And they didn't find out about the money. I went inside, and the prisoners asked me, they're like, hey, are you fighting with somebody? Are you helping somebody? Like, why are you here? You're a kid. Are there any
other kids there, or you're the only kid?
No, just I was myself.
You're the only kid?
Yeah, I was just walking into a bunch of prison full of adults, and it's not like an American prison. It's like a warehouse that's full of people. Perhaps they didn't have a place to sleep. Everybody kind of slept in a different angle because they just kept people, and there was no beds, there was no pillows.
How many people in the place?
I would say about maybe 300 people.
Okay.
And there was one bathroom, and I was terrified. And one of the prisoners asked me, and he said, like, why did they bring you here? I said, I just refused to give my money, and they couldn't believe it.
Were they protective of you? The prisoners, they were good to you?
They were, actually.
Okay,
so I had a prisoner help me out, and I said, I'm dying. I don't care what happens to me. I'm dying just to let my family know where I am, because then they can do something, or at least just the family to know. I felt at that point my life is over. And I told him that I have some money in my pocket. I've kept in my socks. And he said, you know what, give me the money. I gave him the money. He went and called one of the guards at night after everybody went away. And there was a guard that actually cleaned the office of the commanding officer in that prison. And there was a landline in there. And you know back then that nobody can tell if they used your landline or not. And he told me that person took money and he could make a phone call. So they gave that guard the money. I saw the prisoner hand him the money. I gave him the phone number of our landline. And I was praying that somebody, one of my family members, would answer the phone, because they'll probably be looking for me. It was late at night. And I didn't come from school. And they were actually looking all over the place. And my brother answered the phone. And I asked him, please, to let me know who would answer the phone, to know that he called them. My brother answered the phone. And he told him that he's in prison. This is where he is. And my family started coming to the prisons, trying to negotiate with the commanding officer in prison to give him money and would smash the reports. Because if the reports doesn't get smashed, I was going to go to a bigger court and I was going to get probably executed. And Saddam's government could care less how old you were. Once you're considered an enemy of the state, you're an enemy of the state.
Permanent.
Yeah, I was being treated as a fighter.
Now at this point, what feeling is it producing in you? Is there hate? Is there anger?
Absolutely.
Is there animosity? What are you feeling?
I would say I entered that prison a child. I did not leave the same. When I walked away from that prison, and when I actually didn't know where they were taking me when they took me out of prison. I was being tortured, I was being hit. I came out and I was in a really bad shape. And I thought they were gonna finish me right there. That's what I thought. They took me out to an area that I'd never been in 3 weeks. And the slide door opened. And I saw my dad. And I think at that point, I was just in a very different stage of my life. And when I left that prison, I didn't know what was happening during that time. I didn't know any negotiations between my family or the commanding officer in prison. And when I left that place, I don't think my life has ever been the same. I left that place completely carrying hate against these individuals, because I saw the violence they carried against
Feeling of
people.
revenge?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And were your uncles already killed at this point, or no?
They were already dead, yeah.
So that's already explained.
Yeah.
And the amount of hate that produced wasn't close to the amount of hate it produced you being in jail.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because I saw like how they treated you. How they treated you. Like they try to get confessions out of you didn't have. And I didn't even know what to say at that point in my life. You know, I didn't even know what to give them. And if they asked for something, I would have gave it to them. If they asked me to sign on 100 papers, I would sign it, just to not get beating and not get hit. And when they hit you hard. They don't care. They treat you as an animal. And that's the people that controlled you and ruled your country.
Do you remember any of it till today?
Absolutely.
Like, do you wake up in the middle of the night flashbacks, or no? You don't have those things anymore since you feel safer?
No, not flashback to prison, but actually, I would say after they have broken me, I became less afraid of them. I was way less afraid of them leaving that prison. And to this day, you know, after even I became an intelligent
Not everybody's
asset,
like that, though.
Yeah, some people, you know, some people are gonna walk away. They're gonna, you know, be a victim. But for me, I was less afraid of them.
Yeah. When that typically happens, you produce either somebody that confines and, you know, kind of gets quiet and doesn't say anything because they're afraid. Yeah. But you can also produce a true believer that never forgets the way you treated them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that stays with them. It's obviously that's what happened with you.
Yeah.
So now you leave. At 17 years old, what gave you the opportunity? At that time, it's 1998, you're 12 years old. Saddam is still running Iran. 03 is when his regime falls, right? Because he's 79 to 03.
2003, yeah.
What's happening during this time? Because I know you said in one place where you said, I thought Saddam was going to live 500 years.
Yeah,
and the regime was never going to change.
Exactly.
When it happened to you, do you remember the moment where you were at when that took place?
Yeah, I was in my house. And I opened my front door and there was an American soldier standing there. And that's what everybody was scared to make one move towards that American soldier, because they thought that the Americans would pull out like 1991 and that Saddam will be coming back to take revenge after people. So people were very hesitant. People couldn't process the point that Saddam's gone, actually. This tyrant that controlled Iraq for 35 years is gone. It's over. People couldn't believe that. fact. But when I opened that door and I saw an American soldier, it kind of like, I was at a point where I just wanted to kind of pinch myself. I couldn't believe it.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You said something. I was reading it as well,
Yeah.
where you asked the soldier that came to you,
Yeah.
you guys going to leave? No, we're not going to leave. We're going to stay here.
Yeah.
Is there a feeling of letdown when the American troops would come, you felt safe, and then they left, you felt heartbroken because the soldiers
Absolutely.
didn't care? You feel that experience when they leave. You're heartbroken.
Absolutely.
I gave you my trust. I thought you guys were going to take care of me, but
Yeah.
now America lets you down again and leaves.
Absolutely. I mean, 1991, this is what happened. This is why the thousands of Iraqis died, because they thought Americans were going all the way down to Baghdad, and then they pulled out. And Saddam came after what he did to them. He buried them alive. Kamakal Ali came over, his cousin, and buried everyone alive that didn't fight against the Americans. So there was a doubt for the Iraqi people. There was a doubt that we can't really trust the Americans if they would really take him out. Maybe he'll come back. But for me, is I got that assurance from that American soldier. I said, are you guys staying, or this is just another comeback, like 1991?
So he says he's staying. What's your next move?
Next move, actually, I opened the rest of the door. We started having a conversation. Because if he said no, I would have shut down the door and walked away. But when he said yes, I opened the rest of the door and I started asking him a question. And I had about like maybe, I walked with that soldier as he was moving, and I asked him a lot of questions. I asked him all the questions that I need to ask, that they were not leaving. Now,
at this time, do you know a lot? Have you been inspired to
Absolutely.
want to do your own due diligence?
Yeah,
and
because
kind of,
you knew things, but you couldn't talk about them. Perhaps I learned English, but I was never able to speak it. That was the first time I ever spelled an English
does
word.
anybody know the internal rage that is being created in you during this time, or no? Does your mom and dad know? Like,
No.
are they saying, Hamody John, just relax, you know?
No, I actually
too
was.
much?
I kept a very. I was so oppressed after leaving prison, because anything I would do, I would die immediately. Anybody I would run if I ran to the wrong person. So my life went to like a chaos after leaving
Did you go to
prison.
school? Was a lot of self-education?
I went to school, and I would tell you, I went from being an A student to an F student. I couldn't care anything about school.
But how'd you learn English, though?
I was studying at home.
Oh, so that's what I'm saying. You became a self-starter.
Yeah, I studied at home. My
where
dad
are you
has
getting
a
your
library.
intel? Oh, he has a library.
Yeah.
Got
He
it.
has a library, and actually his books he got from England, that when he was in England.
Now, what was he religion-wise? What is your dad?
My dad was actually a Shiite, but he was like an atheist, but he didn't tell anybody.
He was an atheist, but he didn't tell anybody. And your mom?
My mom was a Sunni, yeah.
Your mom was a Sunni?
Yeah, was a Sunni.
And by
yeah.
the way, Saddam was a Sunni, right? Even
Well,
though
he was a Sunni,
Yeah,
yeah,
he was a
but-
Sunni, even though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so then you're following him. You're kind of asking all these questions, et cetera, et cetera. What's your next move after that? Because I know the Iraqi military is getting started. You're the 19th soldier. How does that part take place?
They made an announcement on the radio. They were looking for new members to join the new Iraqi military after they let go of the old Iraqi military. I felt my freedom wasn't going to come free. I wasn't just going to sit home and freedom was going to come all the way. If I wanted to have a constitution for the first time in my life that would protect my right as a child, somebody has to go out and fight for it. And my generation was just at the door. And I decided I was going to go join the new Iraqi military, because I don't want to sit home and wait for somebody to control me again, because, you know, Al-Qaeda had entered Iraq. The Ba'ath Party members started slowly turning into religious figures, from a loyalist to Saddam to more religious figures, because anything against America becomes automatically a religious movement. And I wanted to go and fight against these guys equally in an equal battle, gun to gun.
Were you recruiting?
I'm sorry?
Were you recruiting, or
no,
the new military was recruiting?
The new Iraqi military was recruiting. Actually, the American military, they were doing the whole processing the recruiting.
In that time, how are you viewed in the community? Are you a voice? Do you have pull? Do you have influence?
No, nothing.
You're just a 17-year-old kid.
It's a quiet person. You never heard anything from.
Nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
No one knows what you're thinking about.
Nobody.
So it's not like you're playing soccer outside. You got 50 friends. You're the cool guy. Nothing.
Came from inside of a dark room in the house to straight to the Iraqi military. Yeah.
Got it. So now you're in the Iraqi military, 19 people, 19 soldiers there.
Yeah.
Where does that relationship go with you then becoming a sergeant major at 19 years old, where the typical sergeant major is 40 or 50 years old? You're getting that responsibility at 19 years old.
Exactly.
Why would they trust you to be a sergeant major?
In 2003, when they established the first battalion of the Iraqi military, which I was a member of, people were actually encouraged to do something. But once Al-Qaeda and the Islamic movements realized that they were going to have people of an Iraqi background fighting side by side by American, that was more dangerous to them because we didn't have a digital database in Iraq. You can tell who's who. You couldn't tell anybody. We have that instincts to know what area you come from, where you live in Iraq. We can tell if you're actually if you're a Ba'ath Party member, if you're a Republican Guard officer. We can just tell by talking to you, or what areas you come from, or what neighborhood do you live in, because your social status is what determine who you are. So that was scary for all these groups to see Iraqis that would come fight with Americans. And they actually, I got in the first shipment that got sent to Karakush, which is actually near the Iranian borders, to be trained by an American company called MPRI, American Retired Vietnam Veterans, mostly Marines and Army veterans. And the second shipment that was supposed to make it to the base got blown up by a car bomb. And from that moment, everybody was discouraged to join the Iraqi military. And in 2004, I went to Haifa Street, which was the most dangerous 2 miles in Iraq during that time, and to retrieve bodies of new Iraqi recruits that actually just came in to fill an application. So that's how much they were focused on Iraqis joining the fight with Americans side by my side. And in a long battle, I had 29 soldiers. I left there with 9. I was shot here in my eye. I had shrapnel above my right eye. I had shrapnel on my knees. And once they started the killing towards Iraqi soldiers working with Americans, the Iraqi people automatically became discouraged from that idea because people have families. They would go home at the end of the day, and that's where they can get you, hurt you or hurt your family. So 50% of people in my unit in 2004 after that battle quit their job.
Did they ever come after your family or no?
I never went home.
So when's the last time you saw your parents?
So when in 2003, when I left to go get recruited, I never went home. I never went home. Because if I went home, I would get captured. People would know I'm in the military.
So maybe it was an advantage for you nobody to know who you were.
Exactly.
Being a quiet guy.
Nobody knew anything, even in the Iraqi military. Nobody knew because I never went home. Truly, the ones that were under the danger is the one that had kids and family and they had to go home on leave. And that's the dangerous, is that most of the people I was fighting with were Kurds. They came from Kurdistan, so the neighborhoods are safe. Some of them were the south of Iraq. They didn't have Al-Qaeda. They didn't have all these, like the Sunni kind of extremists in their areas. People who lived in Baghdad, they were the biggest target. Some of them would go home and never come back, and we never found what happened to them. So I never went home, and I just stayed in uniform. And after that battle, I received a battlefield promotion. I became a sergeant major in the Iraqi military, and within a week, the American Special Forces requested me to become the Iraqi MOD Command Sergeant Major because I was the only NCO that spoke English at that point.
You were the only NCO that spoke English at that point?
At that point.
And at what point did you start providing intel to the U.S.? When did that
2005, when I actually got appointed to the Iraqi MOD.
2005, you would be how old in 2005? Some 19 years old,
19
yes?
years old, yeah.
So at 19 years old, you're not providing intel to U.S.?
I became an official intelligence asset for the U.S. intelligence.
And who are you communicating with? You're communicating with the, I know a lot of your information would go to the White House. President Bush have a lot of your briefings would be given to him. General Petraeus, you got a lot of these.
In the beginning, it was actually strictly to the U.S. military intelligence. So,
strictly to the U.S. military intelligence?
Strictly, in the beginning. Okay. That was like the beginning when I got recruited.
Is it because they still don't trust you? It's kind of like...
No, I don't think it was about a trust. It was that I was just the right candidate in that building because these were Americans. Their job was to build the infrastructure of the Iraqi military. They would cross every single day from an area called the Green Zone, which is a U.S.-controlled area, to the MOD, which is a next door to the Green Zone. So once the Americans come into this building, this is not considered a U.S. base. About 50 of them, but one thing they didn't realize, that the American government, that the terrorist organization in Iraq started forming themselves as a political party. You have people in the government that actually works with Al-Qaeda. You have people in the government that works with Iran. You had literally every single one of your enemies inside of that building. But the Americans did not know how to react or how to deal with that because this was new for them. I was basically the only candidate for them that was a young age, never been in the old government, never been in the old Iraqi military, and spoke English, and it was more of the Americanized NCO, someone who was trained strictly by the Americans. And I was basically the assurance to their safety being in the building.
How did they not know that you're providing intel on the Iraqi side, the enemy side, not necessarily on the U.S. side? How were you able to get the intel and provide it to them without them knowing that you're the one that's providing intel for them?
Because nobody knew who I had anything to do with Americans. My job was to be the command sergeant major to provide security for the building from inside and outside of the building.
How are you? When are you meeting with U.S. to give them the intel or the information?
So in 2005, my main job was to protect the intelligence team that was there to collect intel inside of the building. Later on, when I got recruited by the OGA agents, there was nothing. I would not have any communications in that building with any Americans whatsoever. Perhaps the Americans were told not to speak to me if they see me in the hallway, and I would only meet them in the green zone in a secure location, about 6 miles from that place.
Nobody followed you to know where you're going. Nobody was
because they don't
paranoid
have
of you.
green zone badges. I was the only one with the access to.
Who gave you a green zone badge?
Americans.
But wouldn't that be a tip on, like to know that you?
Nobody knew I had that kind of access.
Oh, nobody knew you had that kind of access.
No, nobody knew.
And there was nobody following you.
No, of course I would know. I was trained to make sure that no one follows me, because there are certain people that had access inside of the green zone, but certain places I would go inside of a U.S. bases in the green zone, and areas where no Iraqi local nationals would exist.
Now, who were some of the most dangerous people that you associated yourself with at the time, that were people that could, create a lot of havoc?
Back then it was members, so we had a list of all the operators that were operating inside of the MOD, but our number one and number two, of course, is Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State operatives back then, which later on became ISIS. These individuals were extremely dangerous. They were not just there to collect intelligence, they actually had the potential to hurt Americans. So some of the individuals that I actually went toe-to-toe with was Sabah Dilemi, which was known to be a terrorist in the Anbar province, which was actually inside of the building as well. They were killing Americans in the Anbar province, but they got access through the Iraqi Minister of Defense to be inside of the building. And they all have badges, and they tried to kidnap an American officer from inside of the building in 2005.
And you're in the middle of all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, at that age, at 19 years old, I know I was dying.
You accepted it.
I had a car bomb blowing up every single day in my checkpoint. I had suicide bombers blowing up. That's just in the front checkpoint. I'm not talking about the bad people inside. I had mortars, I had Katyushas falling. My chance of me dying was any day. I would come out at 6 o'clock in the morning to the checkpoint, and every single day I would have something that goes on. So I was gonna die anyway. It's just customize your own death. How do you wanna go down? And for me was, if I can cause them as much damage as possible, I would do so. And I think to this day, I believe I was the only intelligent asset in Iraq that Al-Qaeda and all these terrorist organizations could not kill, because I was a military soldier. I was protected by my soldiers, I was protected by my teams. I don't go to leave home. I don't put on uniform like the rest of the Iraqi officers.
You sleeping at the barracks every night?
I sleep at a place where they think I sleep, but I sleep somewhere else.
Where were you sleeping?
I was sleeping in a different building than where my room was.
In a building?
In a building,
okay, yeah, got it.
Yeah, so I slept actually in an area where there's nobody was living there. I would actually enter my room and I would leave through a window, and I would go sleep where my other place is, because I couldn't trust anybody in the inside.
What kind of a life do you have at that time? Do you have any kind of a personal life? Anything?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Completely no life.
No friend, no women, no girl, no
Nothing.
family, no one to talk to?
Nothing. Once I became an intelligent asset for the U.S. intelligence, I became a machine.
For how long did that last?
Until from 2005 to 2007.
You almost have to have no feelings to be able to do that job.
Really, there was no feelings about it.
Yeah.
I think the joy for me personally, it was seeing those guys go down. That's the joy for me. I enjoyed every bit of it. I wasn't.
When did you know that your purpose, you served your purpose? Like, when was it when you said, I finally got my vengeance? Was there ever a feeling like that for you?
I
Till
never
today?
got it. Till today.
Till today you don't have it?
Till today. I actually cried when I left the MOD. When they told me that I had to leave, and one of my intel sources, one of my team members got killed. They shot him in the head. And it was a message to let me know that we'll wait for you forever until you come out of this building. And I didn't want to leave. And the only reason that my friend died, because I decided to stay.
07, at what point do you come to the States? Like, how long?
2008.
Oh, so you follow, how did you come here? What was the...
The U.S. government brought me here.
They brought out you?
Yep.
Okay. And then from there, do you have a career here? How do you make your money here? Is there a job?
I came here in 2008, and I went straight to doing training on insider threat. As you know, I was like the only intelligent asset that was operating with individual that would work with you, or enemy that would work with you within the same area. So I came here and I started doing training. for the U.S. Military, training them on insider threat.
Contractor?
Training them specifically U.S. military advisors who are working with the Iraqi military.
As a consultant?
As a trainer, as a culture advisor, as a consultant.
Till today?
I've been doing that for about 10 years, and when my book kind of got released, I became a motivational speaker, and I started becoming more of an entrepreneur, investing in myself. But I did this out of love to the military. You know, they used to pay me whatever, and I used to go. Even if I didn't get paid, I would still go. I felt it was a duty for me to return the favor that the United States have done.
What's next for you? You're 34 years old. I mean, motivational speaking, you can do that, but it's not like, you know, when you got the kind of life experience that you got, you know, sometimes there's a temptation to want to do something bigger. Like, what's long-term aspirations for you?
Next thing for me, I would believe, is politics. And that's what most of my fans have been asking.
Here or?
Here.
Here.
Absolutely.
No aspirations ever to go back?
No, absolutely not.
Zero.
I'm done.
You found your home?
I can never go back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even if a revolution takes place and things get settled down?
Could be. You know, if the young generation of Iraq win, yeah, it could be a possibility I can go back to visit.
So I got a question for you.
Yeah,
I have the map here.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously when most people look at this map, you know, it's just kind of like, okay, it's the Middle East. You got Saudi Arabia, Yemen, you know, you got Kuwait, Dubai, you got Jordan, Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran. How do you look at this when you see this map? What's the first thing you think about and look at when you see this map?
I hope it won't insult anybody.
No, it's all good.
I look of neighbors that we shouldn't have.
You look at neighbors that you shouldn't have.
Yeah, it's just have never been. You know, like some of them has not done, but I would say, you know, like when you look at Saudi Arabia and Iran, it's two neighbors that never done you any good.
These have never done you any good.
No.
Why them?
Why Saudi Arabia?
Why Saudi Arabia?
I think Saudi Arabia recently has changed its politics towards Iraq. They have been helpful, which I want to say, in the last few years. But before they weren't. You know, before, you know, from 2003 up to 2000 and maybe, you know, 13, 14, it was just as much the same intention as Iran. They were actually taking care of their business and their conflict with Iran in Iraq. And it cost Iraqis, a lot of Iraqis, their lives.
How do you view Israel?
Israel, I had plenty of respect for Israel. I think Israel, as a small country, has established itself and producing something good for their own people. They're coming with technologies. They're coming with something that's great. Whenever the Arabs learns to do the same thing, they will do great for their nations. I don't believe, by the way, Israel is behind every problem in the Middle East, as it's a norm we have in the Middle East. If someone's bathroom door breaks, they will blame Israel for it. But that's been a psychological...
Who's they?
Governments.
I know, but when you say they will blame, who
like,
is they?
The people, because they're used to it. They've been soaked in this ideology.
To say it's all Israel's fault.
Absolutely. I still have people in Iraq that tell me like, oh, I think Israel is behind this. And I'm like, you'll be crazy to think that.
Who gets credit for that? Mainstream media, as it goes back to media, or
mainstream
at
media,
the
the Ayatollahs, the people who are against Israel, the enemy of Israel, benefit out of that. But I don't believe that's actually a reality or true. Israel does not have any interest in some of the things that are happening, but their enemies would like to blame it on them.
So you saw World War III was trending 1.59 million times. It was trending on Twitter, hashtag being used. Is there any likelihood of anything crazy taking place with war coming out of the Middle East? Any chances of that taking place where it leads to a big war?
It could. If the Ayatollah get more aggressive, I think if the Ayatollah does not pull his hands out of those countries, or the Middle East in general, I can see that not countries going against Iran. I can see each country going against its own. That's what I see.
You can see each country going against its own.
Because in Iraq, we're not going against the Iranian people. We're going against the people that are being appointed, our own people that are being appointed by the Ayatollah. So, and that's been the goal, is to keep us divided. The only way we can break out of that is to be united and not care about what our backgrounds are, and just to look at, we're Iraqis. Doesn't matter where you come from. You know, if you're Yazidi, Shabak, if you're a Sunni, Shia, Christian, whatever you are, it doesn't matter. Once we learn to look at that, we can break out of the chains the Ayatollah put on us.
How often, when you were in Iraq and you went to school, how often would they talk about the Strait of Hormuz? Like, was that a typical conversation or not really?
Actually, we looked at it just in geography.
Yeah.
We know that the Gulf, we call it the Gulf.
Yeah.
I know that Iranians call it the Persian Gulf. Arabs call it the
Arabian Gulf. You call it the Gulf.
I just call it the Gulf because I really don't know where the truth is, and sometimes you really have to think. You can't go with your emotions when it comes to what you've been told. Sometimes you really have to think geographically, where does this area belong to? But I think Iran has been using this as a pressure point on the rest of the world. And it needs to be a way where this place needs to be utilized, or this place needs to be controlled.
It's a method of bullying. It's a method of leverage for them. It's a method of them putting the fear, because when you got most of the oil in Asia coming from here, China, all those guys are relying on this. They are very worried about conflict being here, because then that means they're going to be paying the price, because China doesn't have as much oil as they think they do.
I mean, look what happened in the UK recently, you know? They easily took a British ship out of the place.
That's right.
And they use it to actually they use it to pressure certain countries in Europe and in the Middle East too.
These are interesting times, man. I mean, I look at the people of Iran, and they message me, and we talk all the time, regularly, and you feel for them, because I lived there for 10 years, and I know what it was like to be a kid, and we're going against Saddam. So Iran's going against Iraq, and Saddam is bombing, and this whole 8 years. And I'm living in the capital. We're getting bombed. We're going to the city of Karaj, Bandar Pahlavi at the time, Drash, everywhere you go, and bombing. It's a lot of fear that it puts in kids. But there's a lot of true believers that came out of it that are also looking forward to seeing a revolution take place, to possibly go back and visit their homeland. It will be very, very interesting to see what happens here in Iran in the next 3, 6, 12 months.
12 months, yes. I think if Iran fixes itself, the rest of the Middle East will be automatically in peace. If the Iranian people make that change, it's a change for every nation in the Middle East. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I think for that to happen, a lot of it has to do with U.S., depending on who's running the regime here, switches politics on who they support. It becomes too much about politics. And when Iran was good with the Shah being there and there was peace, I mean, obviously nothing is perfect. You're talking about Saddam Hussein had 35 different military intelligence, you know, while the Shah had Savak. But I think if it goes back to good, the people that have been abusing these nations with oil, if they get out of the way and don't do the bullying and the games, I think it can stay peaceful. But if it doesn't, there's always going to be another Khomeini, another Saddam Hussein to inspire, where they're growing up looking up to these guys, and they want to be the next one. I want to be the next Soleimani. It's not. I don't think it's going to be as easy as if Iran is peace, Middle East is going to be peace. I think it's going to be a good 40, 60 year of control before that takes place, because you got to get the generations to have more peace in them.
If you don't take this government, you're going to have maybe 100 Ayatollah for the next decade.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Yeah, it's not going to change, and that's why I think, you know, we expect things to come peacefully, but
it's not going to be.
It's not going to be.
No, it's going to be very, very ugly, and I think a lot of people, typically, you know how one time I sat down with a guy. This guy's a billionaire. His family's worth $3.9 billion, and I'm trying to do business with them, and we're sitting down. I'm in insurance. I'm coming up. I'm 30 years old. He, at the time, is the son of this family that's worth $3.9 billion. He sits there with me and says, listen, Patrick, here's the difference between us and you. We know you want us to do this deal with you. We'd love to do it. But for us, I wake up every morning with one job. My job is to protect our family's billions. Your job is to make billions. It's a different situation. You need to take risks. We don't need to take risks. I think there's a lot of nations that don't want to see a lot of movement here because any kind of risks hurts them. They would much rather be at peace, but these guys, the Iranian populace, has to be looking at it as a coming up with the opportunity for them. They're fighting for their future freedom, and it's going to take some courage and guts and risk to be able to make that happen for themselves.
We got to learn to take losses.
It's inevitable. It's easier for you and I to say we're sitting over here than for them watching and say you don't know what it's like to be the parent or the kids and all this other stuff. But at the same time, it is what it is. Look, final thoughts. I watched your documentary, the first military intelligence documentary that was done. It was very interesting on Amazon. We'll put the link below.
Awesome.
And the book as well, we will put the link below as well. I highly recommend you. If you want to know more about what's going on today, and I think it's something for you to find out for yourself, you got to go study some of these things in today's times. Probably, I'd say probably more than in the last 19 years, okay, 18 years since 9/11 happened. I think it's probably more important today to study the conflicts taking place in the Middle East today than probably in the last 10 or 15 years. So if you haven't read this book yet, we'll put the link below for you to go purchase the book. The documentary, Mario, let's put the link below as well. Having said that, Hamody, thank you so much for coming out and sharing your intel with the rest of us and some of the information and experience with the rest of us.
My pleasure. It's an honor to be here.
It's been a blast. If you like to sit down with Hamody Jasim regarding the Middle East, you will definitely love these other two videos. One of them is a video I made on the history of U.S.-Iran, especially with the conflicts taking place today, recently after the Soleimani killing. And then the other one is an interview I did with General Spalding, who had some experience in China that is probably very important for everybody around the world to know about, because he specialized in 5G and how China is trying to be the largest empire in the world. So if you want to watch the Iran one, click here. If you want to watch the China one, click here. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, click here. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.